If you're trying to move out and find a place of your own, there are some rental expenses I want you to be aware of before you attempt to move out of your parents' house or move out of your roommate's shared apartment to get a place of your own. And I feel like knowing these rental expenses will prepare you to know the kind of rental budget you're gonna have before you get your own apartment. Now, what are these rental expenses that you need to be aware of before you go to find a place of your own? Well, one of them is your rent. So whenever you go into an apartment complex and you're trying to get a place of your own, apartments will always, tell you what your rent is going to be. What they give you is what is called a base rent. That does not necessarily mean that's all you're gonna pay monthly. Your base rent is not your actual rent, meaning whatever it is that they tell you you're gonna pay, it's not actually what you are going to be paying every month. There is a high chance you're gonna pay more than that, because when apartment leasing of agents, when they tell you that hey, this is what your rent is going to be, they're just giving you the base rent. They are not giving you your actual rent prices. And what other rental expenses do you have to know besides the base rent? Well, I'm talking about the electric bill. Your electric bill most times is going to be independent from what your apartment complex is going to charge you. Why? Because the electric bill is run by a third party, a company, an energy company that has absolutely nothing to do with your apartment complex. And there's no way to ascertain what your electric bill every month is going to be. Why? Because it depends on your usage, right? If you're using too much of electricity, your electric bill is going to be different from your neighbor who may not be using much of the electricity that is passing through the whole apartment complex. Now, another thing to know is gas. In some states, particularly in the northern states where it's cold, some apartment complex may have gas directly connected to the fireplace, right? And if your apartment has something like that and you're using it, you're paying for gas. Again, the apartment complex, when they tell you the base rent, the gas bill that you're paying has absolutely nothing to do with the base rent. That's gonna be the base rent plus the electric bill plus the gas bill. Now, what might be constant every month might be your insurance, your rental insurance, and yes, if you're a young working class adult that is trying to get a place of your own, most apartment complexes, if not all apartment complexes that are renting apartment units to young working class adults or any other adult on that manner, we always request that you have a rental insurance. Why is this important? Well, this is important in case of apartment damages, right? So if there's a fire, you come back home, there's a fire, and the fire has gone through your apartment unit and destroyed most of your stuff, right? Your insurance is gonna cover up to some certain percentage of what it is that you lost. Hence, why most apartment complexes want you to have rental insurance before you get an apartment with them. Now, what does this look like? Well, there are two ways you could go about it. You could either get your own rental insurance, or you could use the one offered by the apartment complexes. I have observed over more than a decade and a half of renting that apartment complexes, the rental insurance that they're gonna offer you is gonna be higher than what, say, your car insurance is gonna offer you as rental insurance, or you go find some other cheap rental insurance out there. Apartment complex rental insurance is always higher. That's why I usually tell younger working class adults, I said, if you are frugal and you just want to save on that rental insurance, because the chances of your apartment catching fire is very, very slim, right? You might as well just go for a cheap rental insurance. In my case, whenever I rent, I usually use Lemonade and I pay $8 monthly. Now, I have used an apartment rental insurance before and they were charging me $45 monthly. Yeah, and the reason why I did that was because the apartment complex wouldn't go with Lemonade. They didn't trust Lemonade. They didn't want to have anything to do with Lemonade. So I had no choice but to go with them rather than using my car insurance or any other insurance out there, because it was already stressful as it is. So if you are trying to get a place of your own, your own apartment and you're looking on the cheap end, I just say go with those cheap insurances like Lemonade, where you get to pay $8 compared to whatever it is that the apartment complex is offering you. Now, if you're in another state and the apartment complex is offering you something cheap or affordable within the price of 20 or 25, or at least, at most $25 monthly, you could go with them. But $45 monthly on that, for me personally, especially if you're going to be renting a studio or a one bedroom as a young working class adult, if you're not making that much and and you're trying to save money, I just say go with those cheap rental insurance. Chances of the apartment burning down is very low, very, very slim. So, especially if you don't have anything valuable there. Now, it being that, when you move in, you have a lot of things that worth a lot of money, then you can go, obviously, with expensive rental insurance so that if something bad happens, say you come back home and your apartment was broken into, the rental insurance could cover most of that. Now, another thing I want to talk to you about, another rental expense that you're going to have is going to be parking and storage. Yes. It's not part of your rent. It's in addition to the base rent that your apartment complex tells you. Now, some apartment complexes are good enough to give you a parking space once you get an apartment unit. One parking space for free. And others just want you to park anywhere you want, but not covered parking. What do I mean by covered parking? Covered parking is the parking with the roof. You know how you drive into some apartment complexes? Some parking space has roof on it, where those ones are paid for. Otherwise, some apartment complexes just want you to park anywhere you want. Anywhere you see an open space, you could park, as long as they don't throw away the car, right? Or the car is registered with the apartment complex. Now, if you're someone that wants to get a parking space that has the roof on it, or one that you can drive in and park and close the garage door in the apartment complex, it's going to cost you money. So if the apartment complex is telling you what your base rent is and you're trying to get this, just know that that expense, rental expense, is not going to be added to your rent. Your base rent is just your base rent. If you're adding this in addition to your apartment unit and you don't want to do the free open space parking, just know you're going to pay more than what your base rent is. For instance, if your base rent is $1,200, just know that at the end of the month, you're not going to be paying $1,200. You're going to be paying $1,200 plus your electric bill, your gas bill, if that's permitted, your rental insurance bill, and if you decide to go with covered parking space, you're going to pay for that monthly too. So at the end of it, I kid you not, that base rent that was $1,200 could be $1,300 and some dollars, right? It could end up being $1,350, it could end up being $1,400. Yes, that's why I always advise on working class adults that if you go to an apartment complex and they give you what the base rent is, try to get an estimate of other rental expenses associated with renting that apartment unit. Now, some leasing agency will not give you an accurate price on each of the expense. However, they're gonna give you an estimate. That may be like, okay, well, for the average electric bill for people living in one bedroom apartment here is maybe $150 every month or $100 every month. And that way you're thinking already, you're like, okay, well, this is what I'm gonna be budgeting for electricity, right? Now, some apartments might also include internet and cable in the base rent already, or some may even add that on top of the base rent. Take for instance, if your base rent is $1,200, you might get an apartment that wants you to have their internet and cable, and it's mandatory. Now, for me personally, I've always avoided apartments like that because I don't want them stressing me out. Why? Because it's not compulsory that I'm gonna have internet. It's not compulsory that I'm gonna have cable. I can live without those, right? And nowadays too, we have mobile phones, right, where you can turn on your hotspot and you can connect, and they stay under your cheap monthly phone bills. So it wouldn't make sense that if I don't have a family or if I don't live in with my girlfriend, that I have to buy Wi-Fi to watch television. If it's possible for me to not even do without a television, I would. In fact, let me tell you this. Television to me is for the creative reasons. You're not gonna find me sitting down and watching television because I don't have time for that, right? So if you're a young working class adult like me that may not have time for those things, you could do without them, especially if you're going to an apartment that wants you to get their internet and cable, which is gonna be an expense unto itself. If it's not part of the base rent that they told you, forget about it. Don't even go for it. Say no thanks. Use your hotspot until you're able to make enough money to afford Wi-Fi, right? So there are some apartments that you're gonna go into, and you know the apartment complexes, they want you to get their internet and their cable, and they will tell you, oh, it just cost about what, $50 monthly in addition to your base rent. If you get that and you don't get to use the internet as often, it's an expense that is wasted away. You know what $50 monthly is at the end of the year? That's $600. $600. I know some people might be like, oh, it's cheap, but there are some working class adults out there whose life can be a little easier with $600 if they have that in their savings, right? So this is what I want you to consider as a young working class adult. If you're going into these apartments and you're looking for a place of your own, any apartment that is going to cause you unnecessary stress, try to avoid them, right? Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is going to be trash collection. This is very, very important. Why is trash collection very important? Well, this is what I want you to know. There are some apartments that you're going to get, and their trash collection is already added into the base rent. And then there are some apartments complex that you're going to go to, and they will charge you trash collection fee on top of your base rent. Take for instance, you are paying $1,200, or you're being told that $1,200 is going to be your base rent, right? Okay. And they ask, hey, what about trash collection? And they will be like, oh, that's additional $30 a month. Now, that's an expense plus your base rent. So you know that when the month comes to an end and it's time for you to pay your rent, you're going to pay the base rent, which is $1,200. You're going to pay the electric bill on top of the base rent. If there's gas there, you're going to pay gas on top of the base rent. You're going to pay trash collection on top of the base rent. If you decide to go with their Wi-Fi and cable, you're going to pay that bill too, right? Just be aware of these things, right? Like when you walk in there after touring the apartments, because remember I told you that if you're going to rent an apartment, you better tour the place, because you don't want to get an apartment that you're going to end up regretting, right? So if you tour the place and they take you back to the leasing office to discuss contract terms and to get you to sign that contract, make sure as you're reading through that contract term, each one tells exactly what you're expected to pay besides the base rent. Now, there's an apartment that got me some time ago, and I'm going to tell you this story. So I got an apartment, right? And they told me that it was a one-bedroom apartment with a living room, a kitchen, the restroom, and all that. And I was told that my base rent was going to be, what was it again? $750. Yes, it's that cheap. This is Texas. Things are cheap in Texas. So they told me the apartment rent is going to be $750, right? And I thought that was what I was going to pay. This was when I was younger, in my 20s. So when the first month came in, right, I didn't get $750. I actually got $890 something as my rent. And I didn't budget for that. And guess what? I was so stressed out about it, right? Why? Because I found out that I had to pay for something called sewage fee. And I know it was little. It was like what I think it was $13 or something. I also had to pay for something called a water authority fee. And when I called this apartment complex, I'm like, hey, you guys only told me that my rent was gonna be $750. How come you guys have all these things added up? And they're like, okay, well, the apartment is built on something called an aquifer, right? So every month, people, residential areas, everybody's paying something called a water authority and sewage fees. And the water fees there, when you add up everything, it was $890 something. That's what I ended up paying as rent, plus associated expenses, minus electric bills, by the way, minus rental insurance, by the way. So when you add up the rental insurance, electric bill, my bills ended up being about 900, sometimes up to $1,000 from the 750. So you see, if you're a young working class adult that is struggling and you finally find an apartment of your own and you decide to budget for 750 because that's what they told you as base rent, and that's all you budgeted for, the most you could pay for rent every month, and you didn't do your due diligence, and at the end of the month the rent starting coming and they're telling you, hey, listen, you have about 900 and something to pay as total rental expenses. You're gonna be like, oh my God, I didn't tell you anything, and now you have to be so stressed out. I don't know if you've been stressed out about money. Yes, money stresses people out, especially young working class adults. There's a special kind of stress that comes with wondering if you're gonna make rent. This is especially if you don't have enough income coming in every month. Hence why I say that if you're a young working class adult that is starting out and you have decided, okay, you're gonna get a place of your own, that's fine, and I applaud you for that. What I want you to do for me is to always know what your rental expenses are gonna be. What is it that you're gonna pay for rent? And when they tell you what that is, ask them, hey, what you just told me, is that the base rent? And if it's the base rent, they will tell you, yeah, that's the base rent. And then ask them again, could you give me an estimate of other associated rental expenses? Now, most leasing agents that you're gonna meet are courteous enough to, list an estimated rental expenses for you and then print it out and give it to you. That's what I do. Even at my age now, as a man in his mid-30s, even when I rent an apartment, I always still want them to tell me what my base rent is and what I expect to pay for other associated rental expenses, because there will be other associated rental expenses as long as it's not a house, right? There will be other associated rental expenses like the insurance, electric bills, if you're using gas too, also trash collection fees, sewage fees. If the apartment complex is sitting on top of an aquifer, that's the water system, you are gonna pay some certain fees to the water authority. And all these are what I want you to be thinking about as a young working class adult if you're out there looking to get your own apartment. Because if you have an estimate of what your rental expenses are gonna be, you'll be much prepared for that. You know if the rental expenses and the rent itself is outside of your budget or if they are within your budget. Because remember, you want a situation where you're gonna be able to pay your rent and rental expenses and still have a lot left to take care of your needs as a young working class adult. And that's how you avoid being very stressed out about money, because you are living within your means, right? You're not having the apartment complex add unnecessary expenses to you because they didn't tell you about the hidden fees that are associated with the apartment unit that you're renting. And that's what I want you to do, my friend. If you're ever out there looking for an apartment, once you get that, sit down with them and let them give you an estimated list of other associated rental expenses, right? Because your base rent is not the actual rent that you pay. And that's all I've got to tell you today. I remain yours faithfully, Mr. Chime from weeklybego.com. I hope you have a good week. Chime out.